Lesson 3, Classroom Procedures. In this lesson, we'll discuss entering and leaving the classroom, how to get and use the instruments, transitions during class time, center procedures, picking a partner, and class participation. Entering and leaving the classroom. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is walk in and go to your seat. That's the first thing you tell the kids when they enter the classroom is walk in and go to your seat. Then come in quietly or they get to go out and practice again. That's a big one for the kids because a lot of times they'll come in way too loud. And this won't happen all the time, but when your students come in the classroom and you have a certain class that comes in and they're just way too loud and rowdy, instead of sitting them down, trying to quiet them down over and over, it's going to take, time out of your class period. Just simply keep the line moving, snake it around, and come back outside and come right back in the door and practice again so they know that's what you expect. Lots of procedure practice at the beginning of the school year. If you set your school year off right with procedures at the very beginning of the school year, then the rest of the school year will go very smoothly. You can just recall those procedures throughout the school year. If they're forgetting, entering how to enter the classroom, but you've practiced it over and over, when you exit the classroom and come back in, they'll know exactly what you expect. Call names one at a time to line up to leave. Okay, so whenever it's time to leave the classroom, after your lesson is done, you can call names one at a time to leave. You can either do this by, rows, call one name at a time in each row, like row 1, you can call them by rows or line up by their names. Or you can do bullet questions where you're asking questions after the lesson and have the kids line up by who answers the questions correctly, or simply call the kids who are sitting quietly to line up first. A lot of times the classes will also have a line order that they use in their regular classroom. And so a lot of times what you can also do is just call the students' names, and then when they line up, they just get in their line order where they're supposed to stand the rest of the day, where they stand throughout the rest of their day also. And then, so we just talked about question and answer to line up to leave, and then line procedures. Are their arms folded in the line? Are their hands held behind them? Are their hands by their side? Where do they put their arms when they're leaving? This is a big one because a lot of times I feel like teachers are so focused on the kids talking in line, but a big issue, especially with these smaller kiddos, is touching each other, pushing out of place, or he cut me, or they're standing too close together. So if your classroom has tile, a perfect way to do this is the kids stand every other tile and their hands are somewhere where they can't put them on another child, if that makes sense. One quick other thing I want to say about entering the classroom is if the teachers meet you in the hallway, you set the procedure with that teacher, or it's a school-wide procedure for how to get the classes to your room. So if that's you picking up the class from their classroom, or if the teachers walk them to your music classroom and then you just meet them in the hallway, however you get them to the music room is either, like I said, a school-wide procedure or up to you and the teachers in your building. And then once they get in the door to your classroom, that's when your particular classroom procedures start for entering and leaving the classroom. So like I said, the major thing is just setting those expectations with your students right away, what you expect for them to enter and leave the classroom. All right, the next procedure we're going to talk about is how to get and use the instruments. So we talked earlier about how you're going to have several instruments. You're going to have large drums, xylophones, metallophones, glockenspiels, smaller rhythm instruments, and even maybe some keyboards. Maybe not right away, and if you're in a classroom where you don't have all those things, that's okay. You could even, have these procedures for if you're using buckets as drums. Anything you're going to use for the students to play on, even if it's not an official instrument, then you need to have a procedure for it. So the first thing you're going to do is they need to walk quietly to the instrument. No running, no pushing each other out of the way, no skipping to the instrument, just walk to get the instrument, or walk to the instrument if they're sitting by it to play it. Once they get the instrument, place it softly on the floor in front of them, and have them probably put their hands on their lap or cross their arms until you tell them it's time to play the instrument. That way they're not distracted to start playing it before you tell them to, because the next thing I'm going to say is this is an awesome phrase that you can use with your students that actually works amazingly well. If you say, play before I say, I'll take your instrument away, and they know that phrase, and they know that if they play before you tell them it's okay, then you're going to take away their instrument. And then talk to them about being performance ready position. And that's, like I said, the instrument's in front of them. Their arms are either crossed or their hands are sitting quietly on their laps. And then performance ready position means their eyes are on you. They're sitting and paying attention. They're not turned backwards or touching their neighbor. They are ready to play. And then the next thing is when it's time to put the instruments back up, you can put them back up by instrument family, or you can call them by however you want to get them to put the instruments up. But usually it's easiest to just do it by instrument family. What I mean is, for instance, if you have kids that have played tambourines, then call the tambourines, because they're all going to be walking and putting them back in the same section or same box or bin. And also on top of that is the kids know walk quietly to the instrument. That means walk quietly to get the instrument and to put them up. If you see kids running just like you're entering and exiting the classroom procedures, the procedures for the instrument is if they're running to put it away, they got to come back and try it again. If they still don't follow that procedure, then they might maybe losing their instrument the next class period. So the procedures for instruments go a long way. Remember, walking, putting them down correctly, not playing before you tell them to, and performance ready. Performance ready position is also works amazingly with getting the kids ready for band, because if they're in middle school band, they're going to be waiting for the kids to be ready to play their instruments before they play a single note also. Okay, so this is a big one. Procedures for transitions during class time. This is something I have been asked about a lot because, a lot of times the transitions during music classroom can get a little hard because there's a lot going on in the classroom, right? The kids are moving around, putting instruments up, getting instruments, singing, clapping, body percussion, doing movement activities, doing music games. I mean, a lot is going on in that. I'm going to just say 45 minutes because that's how long I saw my students. But in that 45-minute class period, you do a whole lot of things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is call names, rows, or partners. What I mean by that, okay, so let's talk about a transition. The different transitions you're going to see in your classroom is you're going to be going from maybe a warm-up to learning a song, to doing a movement activity, to maybe doing instruments, to if you're doing centers that day, you may be doing that, to closing down the class period, reading them a story. It's completely up to you, whatever your lesson plan looks like that day. But if you are doing a movement activity that requires partners or the whole class or instruments, then call the kids by names, rows, or partners. I personally like to partner the kids up because I feel like it really cuts down on kids being left out. It cuts down on kids fighting over who wants the same partner. You can even do this by numbers. You're 1, 1, you're 2, 2, you're 3, 3. And if you have the same number, you partner up. They're not always going to like the partner they get, and that's just life, right? We are not always going to like the partner or people we work with. So that's just, there's going to be certain times you can let them choose their own partners, but for the most part, I feel like it cuts down on transition times if you just assign partners to the kids, and then that way they just go straight to the activity and aren't sitting there focusing on who they're choosing as a partner. Okay, so another thing for transitions is you always want to make sure in your lesson plans you allow enough time for cleanup. This is something I learned the hard way because I'd be looking at the clock and let's say a class needed to go back to their classroom at 10:45 and it's 10:43 and I'm looking at the mess in my classroom going, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I'm going to get all this stuff put away and get the kids lined up and get them back to their classroom on time and get to the next class I'm supposed to be getting right now. So make sure you allow enough time for cleanup, and that goes with what we just talked about is calling the kids by names, rows, or partners. Make sure you also allow time not just for cleanup, but for them to do it correctly with the correct procedure for cleanup. And then only have 2 to 3 transitions per class period. I can't talk. Sorry, guys. 2 to 3 transitions during each class period. There we go. That means I talked about all the different things that can go into a music lesson. So you don't need to plan everything in a music class. We also talked about not over planning. So let's say that you are transitioning from a warm up, you've just done a singing warm up, and then you're transitioning with your fourth graders to recorders. Okay, so that's one transition. You're transitioning from a warm up to the recorders. Then the next transition is from the recorders, you remembering allowing them time to get the instrument, clean it up, put it up. So that's going to take a lot of chunk of your time for that class period. So maybe the only other transition that day is closing out the lesson with, with bullet questions. So 2 to 3 transitions I would suggest max, because if you have any more than that, if you're trying to fit in a warm up, a song, instruments, movement, recorders, working on a program, and doing scarves with movement, it's just you're going to be frazzled. The kids are not going to be learning effectively because there's too much going on. Practice until it's right. Just like we talked about practicing procedures for coming in and out of the classroom, practice transitions. What does transitions in your classroom look like? We don't run, we don't push, we take turns, wait in line to put your instruments away. Whatever the transitions are, make sure the kids know what you expect. And find what works best for you. You will figure out your flow. You'll figure out what transitions work best in your classroom and how to effectively communicate that with your students. Picking a partner in class participation. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit a minute ago. But like I said, my favorite way to do this is to assign a partner to the kids. Like I said, this cuts down on the I feel left out, this kid's always getting picked last, they're always wanting the same partner. For some reason, there's that one kid everybody loves. So assign a partner to them. It just really cuts down on, like I said, class time lag. And then the next one, this is called the imaginary partner. A lot of times you're going to have either kids absent that day, or you're going to just have a class with an odd number of kids. So the kids actually, they think this is so much fun if they end up with the imaginary partner. I don't know why, but it's fun. Sometimes you as the teacher can be a partner, but I find that difficult because you're also wanting to stand up there and teach the kids. So if you're also being a partner, it's hard for you to teach the lesson and be a partner at the same time. But if the kids are familiar with the activity, then by all means, jump in and be a partner with the kid who doesn't have one. So establish an imaginary classroom partner. You can name him anything, like even just Mr. Music, whatever. And then they just basically pretend someone's standing across from them being their partner that day. Class participation is expected. Make sure they know if you have a partner and you got one who's all gung-ho for music class and the other one's standing there, he's Mr. Jock and he's not having any of it. Make sure they remember what is wrong with me when saying that word? Class participation is expected, and they need to know that participation from both of them is expected fully. And make sure they encourage each other. If someone's not understanding what they're supposed to do, or whether it's a movement activity or an instrument activity or a music notation activity, they encourage each other. They really help each other out. And you'll see new friendships blossoming in the music classroom, or leaders taking place because you're giving them the opportunity to do that. Okay, so that was the end of lesson 3. I want you to look at your worksheet and work through it and thinking of your own classroom as you do that.